So our next speaker loves Latin, and he loves it so much that he's wearing a toga today on stage. Give it up for Andrew Gutierrez.
So, vete omnes, mihi nomen est Andreas, et hodie demonstro cor lingua latina summa. Wrong language. Sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Cesara. I'm a junior, and today I'm going to be demonstrating to you why Latin, the Latin language, is important. So, if any of us here have gone to King's Landing or taken Latin at any point in our lives, you might recognize this. This is the This is the cover art from the Ecce Romani textbook, a very popular textbook in the area, which many would say is superior to the Cambridge Latin Reader. It is. And it's an iconic scene in which our Roman family is traveling to Rome because Cornelius has been called to the Senate to decide matters about the Third Punic War. It's a typical scene, one that we see throughout our studies of Latin. However, some of us who haven't taken Latin in high school might recognize our Latin more readily from something like this. From The Life of Brian, in case you don't know, Brian has decided to write some graffiti on the walls telling the Romans that they need to go home. However, he incorrectly conjugates and declines his verbs and nouns. A Roman official walks by, corrects his grammar, and tells him to write it 100 times on the wall in mourning, or else he will be punished. And so he does it correctly now, Romani ite domum, using the locative case because it's important. So, well, why do we study Latin? Is it so we can understand Monty Python's jokes and understand why Brian's grammar was bad? No, I think it's more so that we can read things like this. Now, if any of you don't know, this is above the archway into the Pantheon, which is the building in the city of Rome wherein the Romans housed all of their gods. It was like one super temple to all of the gods of Rome. And above the doorway reads, M. Agrippa LF Poster Tium Figit. What does that mean? Time for some slight translation. Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, 3 times consul, built this. Wow. So if you didn't know what that said, you'd have no clue who Marcus Agrippa was, the fact that he was 3 times a consul, which was illegal, or the fact that he commissioned the building of the Pantheon. And maybe a tour guide would have been able to tell you that, but sometimes tour guides can't translate their Latin very well. I know from first-hand experience, I've had many tour guides who tries to translate their Latin, or even some Greek, and does a very poor job of doing it. And I try not to correct them too much, but sometimes I can help myself. And so we see, in fact, even as Gavin's example was talking about earlier, a traveler who goes to Rome or to some other city where there are Roman artifacts or Greek artifacts and tries to understand what the culture was, can't unless he understands the language. But why else do we study Latin? Well, because Latin has some amazing works of literature. This is a painting about one of the scenes in the Aeneid. The Aeneid was Virgil's epic about the founding of the Roman people, not the city of Rome. And in this painting here, we see Aeneas holding his father, carrying him out of the city of Troy as it's burning. Now, this is significant because Aeneas really represents a lot of the Roman ideals of manliness, virtue, as well as piety, pietas. Kind of like pietas. Interesting. And so we see that Virgil wrote this book. In fact, I read it 2 months ago, 3 months ago maybe, in Latin class. So I'm still studying it over 2,000 years after it's written. In fact, this painting is from the 1500s, I'm not exactly sure, I didn't take it year history. But we see that Roman literature still influenced historians some 1,500 years after it was written. So clearly, there's something up with these Romans. They did something important. And something maybe a little bit more familiar to all of you. If you don't know who this is, or where this is, go to the oceanfront sometime. It's a pretty cool place. We live in a place called Virginia Beach. You might want to check it out. This is a statue of Neptune, the god of the sea, aptly placed by the oceanfront, because he rules over all of salt water. And why is it that in Virginia Beach, a very modern, very touristy town, we have a statue dedicated to a god from people who were almost 3,000 years old and all dead? Why? Because they are culturally significant. Because the Roman people and the Roman language and the Roman civilization have such an impact on who we are, why we do things, and everything that is all of Western civilization. You look at Western languages, French, Spanish, Romanian, Italian. Look at all those languages. They're called Romance languages. not because they're so pretty and flowery and you can seduce people with them, although, maybe. It's also because they're descended from the Romans and the Latin. In fact, the Latin language is descended from the Latin people, who the Romans just said, hey, we're going to assimilate your language. It's cool. And those languages are the biggest languages in the world, if you put them together. In fact, English, I read in my Ecce Romani textbook in Latin 6 in the introduction, that some 65% of English words can trace their origin to Latin and Greek. That's a pretty big part of a language that's considered Germanic and not only Romantic. Ooh, interesting. So we see that of Western society, our language is based upon the Latin language and the Greek languages, and yet so few of us actually can understand them. Now, I hear a lot of people say Latin is a dead language. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel when I hear Latin is a dead language. Because there's an important distinction that has to be made. It's not that Latin is a dead language. The term that classical scholars use is that Latin is a classical language. I'm going to read this up for a while. Latin is a classical language. And it's called that because although no one is born speaking Latin, and we're not raised speaking Latin, many people still speak Latin into adulthood. In fact, we see Latin schools in Italy, in small towns even, where there are people who make entire towns and they speak Latin to each other in traditional Roman style. And there are Latin words and Latin phrases all throughout scientific, legal, medical texts, throughout literature. There are many, many allusions to classical civilization, classical culture, classical language as well. So Latin, although it may not be spoken naturally so much anymore, is still definitely living. It's called a classical language. In fact, there's an entire country in which Latin is the official language. Granted, it's a different kind of Latin, but it's still Latin. We call it the Vatican City. It's the head of the largest religious institution on the face of the earth, the Roman Catholic Church. So that's kind of a big deal as well. All right, but they also call Latin a gateway classical language. In fact, because Latin grammar and vocabulary actually is quite similar to English, grammar not so much, but the grammar is actually quite similar to other languages. For example, Greek and Latin have very similar grammars. If you learn one, you can learn the other in a matter of days, and which I've done. And so they call that the classical gateway language. So I would invite you to come with me through this gateway, up these stairs. Come on, transition. Along the road, the Via Appia, in case you read your Ecce Romani and remember it, this is where they fell into the ditch. To the Forum Romanum, that's right, the Forum Romanum, the place where the Romans originally started as a marketplace, but then became a center for oratory and culture and civilization. The Forum Romanum, a classical place in a classical city that is the origin of a classical civilization. So, when I was not a wee boy, my sister went to Pennsylvania. And in 6th grade at Pennsylvania, it used to be that you had to take Latin. And I was in 4th grade at the time, and I remember my sister coming home and just being very confused by Latin, because my house was spoke English and we speak French, and Latin is not one of those. And so she was very confused, and she didn't understand why Latin was so confusing to her. But all I picked up on was, holy cow, she's speaking a different language, I want to learn that right now. And so I started taking, I actually took her Latin notes, Stephanie, I'm sorry. And I took her Latin notes from her, and I was trying to study them, but I didn't understand because I didn't have a teacher, I was just trying to teach myself a completely different language. So fast forward a couple of years, I go to middle school, I go to Pennsylvania, and I take Latin in 6th grade because I do what I'm told. And in Latin class, I have a fantastic Latin teacher, Miss Murphy. Shout out to Miss Murphy. She's a really great Latin teacher. She was harsh, but she was good. And she taught me all my basics, my psalms, my declensions. She taught me how to remember my conjugation. And at the end of 6th grade, I had to choose whether to take Latin or if I wanted the easy game French. And I could have gone down the path of taking the very easy game French and learning a modern language in school that I already knew, or I could have even taken Spanish and branched out a lot more. But I decided that I would stick with Latin. A lot of the reason was because my friends were taking Latin, but also because I understood that Latin was the very integral part of who we are today. In fact, when you first take Latin, a lot of times the teachers who are trying to get you to keep taking Latin tell you, Latin is used in medical texts, it's used in legal texts, it's used in science. Look at how much Latin is important. Look at our architecture. That's all Roman and Greek influence. That's the typical spiel they give you. What they don't tell you is about how the Latin community is still very alive, which takes me to, through middle school, into high school, I faced a serious dilemma. At the time when my class was going to come to Princess Anne, Latin was not offered as an MIP language. Yes. I don't understand why to this day, because it's an official IB language, and Mrs. Marble was still here teaching it, so there was really no reason for it not to be an IB language. And Fortunately, right before I started 9th grade, they switched it. I could take Latin and not take a modern language at the same time, thank goodness. And so that made my life a lot easier. So I keep taking Latin, and in 10th grade, I got the opportunity to go to Virginia Junior Classical League Latin Convention. From now on, I just call it VJCL. And so the VJCL convention is in November, and it's when Latin students from all over the state, in high school and middle school, come together in Richmond, and we just take competition exams, and we have art contests and oratory contests, and it's all a really good time. And while I was there, it's where I discovered that the Latin community in Virginia is very much alive. And I'm very lucky, we are all very lucky, we live in a state where the Latin community is so very alive. We take Latin, Virginia, when we go to national convention, is one of the top performing states at national convention. It's really awesome. And so after that, over the past summer, I went to Virginia Governor's Latin Academy, which Mindy Madrona and Charlie Todd got accepted into, shout out to them. And so over the summer, I got to go to Randolph-Macon for 3 weeks and just take classes about Latin, some of them in Latin, and about Greek and about literature and understanding translation and how translation works. It was really interesting. And it was partial immersion, so I had to speak Latin some of the times. That's why my Latin pronunciation is pretty okay. It's not that great. I'm practicing a while. And so it was there that I understood the full extent of the Latin community, because we all see Latin students as a bunch of nerds who have a lot of problems communicating with people because we take a dead language and we can't speak that to other people. But really, while I was there, I met some of the most interesting people in my life at Latin Academy. And I think that's a byproduct not only of being classicists, but also just the governor's school programs over the summer. So that helped. But I was then inspired to this past VJCL convention. So a couple months ago, I ran for VJCL parliamentarian convention, won, and so now I'm VJCL parliamentarian, which sounds really fancy, but I just make sure the Constitution is followed and that elections happen. So it's pretty easy going. But it's really allowed me to get in touch with people who are in Northern Virginia and the Latin community there. And that brings me to the next point, in that Northern Virginia has a really amazing Latin community and a really strong academic community that we don't see in other parts of the state. And this is a little bit of a sad part of the presentation because very recently, I said before that King's Landing, I used to have to take Latin, but now that's no longer the case. It's just an option. And that makes me very sad because that means a lot fewer people are going to take Latin and be able to understand why this is important. So hopefully, email them your 5th grade friends who are trying to figure out what class to take. But basically, there's this standard in Southern Virginia and throughout the area down here that our classical education is not useful, it's not important, and Charlotte's actually going to be talking about why that's kind of bunk as well. But the idea that just because you can't speak it to people in another country necessarily doesn't mean it's not important. I'd like to cite a specific example. Well, it's not that specific. But when you go to an English class, a lot of times you're given a book, told to go read it, and you take a test on it. It's really hard because your English teacher decides to make your English test really hard. And you're probably going to fail it because English tests are hard. Anyway, but afterwards, you have conversations about the literary devices and the rhetorical devices in the text. And I see so many people don't know what to do with that. And I look back on my Latin education and I thank my stars. Because, oh my goodness, you learn so much about rhetorical devices and literary devices in Latin that you would not experience anywhere else. Because one of the things that I found from English classes is that they say, analyze the text. But they don't tell you how to analyze the text. You never get taught what to do to analyze the text. You just are handed it and told to do it. And if you don't do it right, you fail. It's kind of an unfortunate system. But that's the way that things work. So, for example, I see a delicious thing called homoio to luzon. Ooh. And that's just basically when the words end with the same sound. Most people call it rhyming. I call it homoio to luzon. Why? Because I take Latin. And I pretend to sometimes. Oh no. Well, oops. And there's another favorite. They don't see that much in English, but you see a lot of classical language called zeugma. Z-E-U-G-M-A. Zeugma. Ooh, fun word. And that's just when a word agrees with two other words grammatically, but it really only makes sense to one in context. So it opens up a nice little ambiguity. But these things might not seem important to you if you're not a linguist, and I understand that. It really is kind of boring if you don't care about linguistics. But there's also a historical tradition to Latin. We see that in, just a couple hundred years ago, all of educated society, if you will, was fluent in both Greek and Latin. All of our founding fathers, knew and could speak fluently Greek and Latin. In fact, Thomas Jefferson taught himself Greek out of a book while he was on his way to Spain on a ship, because that's the kind of person that he was. That's the kind of person that his society expected him to be. In fact, European society has typically placed a high emphasis on education that we don't see here in the United States, especially in this area of the United States and here in South Virginia. But I mean particularly the humanities and the classics, because we see that Latin programs throughout the area have been getting cut recently, like I said in the study. And also, you see that Princess Anne goes all the way to Latin 7. It is the only school anywhere south of Richmond that I know of that goes up to Latin 7. Other schools in the area used to go up higher than that, but now most schools stop after 5 years in AP Latin. And it makes sense for Prince Anne to go higher because we have the IB program, and so we have the IB Latin. But why are we robbing other students the opportunity to continue their Latin education, their classical education, just because they don't necessarily want to be in the IB? I think that's not fair to those students. That's not fair to anyone who wants to understand where we come from and what our culture is based on. So, is this a talk about why I love Latin? Yeah, I guess. Is it a talk about why you should love Latin? A little bit. But it's also a call to action. Write your school officials. Go to school board meetings and city council meetings. Tell them that we need to fund humanities education, particularly classics education. And if I even get 2 people on this auditorium to do that, I'll consider that a win. That's pretty good. But I think it's really important that we become involved, as Krista was talking about, with the process of how decisions are made around here. And that's why I ask all of you to consider at least taking some action in advocating for classics education. Because really without it, we don't understand what's going on in our world, why we act the way we act, why we eat the foods we eat, why we go to the places we go, and why we speak the languages we speak. And why we write the way we write, why we tell the stories we tell. So I'm just going to leave you with 2 final thoughts. One is, always look out for Romans. That's a self-created meme, you're welcome. And also, as Cato the Elder was known for saying, Carthago delenda est, the enemies of Rome must be destroyed. Thank you very much.